On a calm, uneventful day in Miramar, Florida, in the month of October in the year 2021, life proceeded at its usual, unhurried pace. The sun cast gentle rays over the quiet streets, and the atmosphere was peaceful, almost idyllic. On this particular day, an 18-year-old young man named Dwight DJ Grant was casually strolling through his apartment complex, seemingly absorbed in his thoughts or perhaps simply enjoying the normal rhythm of a typical day. In the midst of his walk, out of nowhere, he encountered someone who suddenly and unexpectedly stopped him in his tracks. The words exchanged between them were surprisingly understated given the gravity of what was about to unfold. The individual who approached DJ silently conveyed a chilling message, whispering with a tone that carried a clear sense of foreboding. "You know what I have to do, right? That I have to hurt you. Like, I have to get you back for what you did." DJ, caught off guard by these ominous words, had no idea that behind the scenes, a carefully woven plan was quietly taking shape around him. Unbeknownst to him, certain individuals he believed to be familiar, even friendly, had already begun to orchestrate a sinister scheme designed to confront him with violence. The plan involved a premeditated confrontation, a staged fight where he would be lured outside under false pretenses. The focal point of this trap was a weapon, specifically a blade, which was meant to be used in the attack. The narrative indicated that the assailant planned to use something to cause serious harm, a weapon like a knife, which had been kept in the vicinity for that purpose. Details emerged that revealed the weapon was not just any knife, but possibly a longer, more formidable object, a sword. The intended victim, DJ, seemed to sense the danger looming, and in a desperate attempt to plead for his life, he appeared to suggest that he was resigned to his fate, essentially urging the attacker to end his life swiftly. He reportedly said, "You're going to kill me. Just choke me out or end it," a heart-rending plea full of fear and hopelessness. The attacker was said to have aimed to choke DJ out, targeting a specific area on the backside of his neck, on the right side, where the blow or strangulation would be carefully directed. This wasn't just an impulsive act of violence but a planned murder attempt, meticulously thought out and executed under the cover of anonymity. This sequence of events, though shocking, only marked the beginning of a much more complex investigation. The story wasn't merely about a violent encounter. It was about the relentless efforts of law enforcement officers piecing together a trail of clues with methodical precision. Detectives worked tirelessly, following each lead, chasing down eyewitnesses, and examining every fragment of evidence to expose the truth behind a teenage murder plot rooted in betrayal, anger, and perhaps revenge. This narrative is part of a channel dedicated to exploring crime stories deeply and thoroughly. Rather than just recounting what happened, the channel aims to guide viewers through every twist and turn in the investigation, highlighting each clue uncovered and every move made by the relentless detectives pursuing justice. If you're interested in real criminal cases, with detailed analysis and without unnecessary distraction, this is the kind of story that will capture your attention. Every detail during the investigation is vital because, by the end, what you initially believed about the suspects might be entirely reconsidered as new evidence is revealed. Now, let's return to the beginning of this tragic chain of events. On what was a seemingly ordinary Sunday evening, specifically October 17, in the year 2021, a sense of unease gradually crept into the life of those around DJ Grant. It all started with a nurse named Mullen Emil, who was working at Memorial Healthcare System, where DJ's mother was employed. This nurse, attentive and caring, noticed that her son, who was a senior at Miramar High School located within Broward County, had not returned home by nightfall. There was nothing about DJ's usual behavior that would have suggested he would disappear without a word, and his sudden absence immediately set off alarms for those who knew and loved him. As evening turned into night, DJ's family and closest friends refused to sit idly by, waiting for news. They quickly took action, scattering throughout the neighborhood, passing out flyers with DJ's picture and vital details, walking door to door, calling his name in every direction in hopes of spotting him or receiving some piece of information. They checked every likely place DJ might have gone: parks, friends' houses, local hangouts, but all their efforts proved futile. DJ, the young man who was participating in his final year of high school, a senior, was nowhere to be found. This unusual silence and disappearance struck everyone as profoundly alarming. The following morning, the local authorities were notified, and police officers descended upon Miramar High School, the place where DJ usually spent much of his time. Their goal was to gather any potential clues or eyewitness accounts that could lead to his whereabouts. As they navigated through the busy hallways filled with students, they identified and questioned individuals who might have information. One particularly nervous girl caught their attention. She seemed visibly distressed, her anxiety evident as she sat for questioning. She explained that she had anxiety and depression, and she believed that DJ had been checking on her regularly because he understood what it felt like to struggle with mental health issues. She added that DJ had been trying to communicate with her, perhaps as a source of support or friendship. She admitted that she hadn't seen him in recent days and did not have any knowledge of where he might have gone. When asked if she knew whether DJ was involved romantically with anyone or had a particular girl he talked to, she said, "To my knowledge, no." The police kept probing her and other students, hoping for any snippet of information that could shed light on DJ's sudden disappearance. The officers appreciated her cooperation and thanked her before concluding their interview. They understood that DJ's case was urgent and that every second mattered in locating him safe. The investigation was just beginning, and every detail, no matter how small, became a critical puzzle piece in uncovering what truly happened to the young man whose life was suddenly thrown into turmoil. Is this truly representative of his usual behavior? Does he typically act in such a manner? It's important to emphasize that he's a good kid, an individual who makes sound choices and lives a responsible life. He doesn't indulge in drinking alcohol nor does he engage in smoking. When he ventures outside, it's always with a definite plan in mind, ensuring he's not wandering aimlessly. He often spends time with his circle of friends, with whom he maintains regular communication. In fact, he calls almost all of his close acquaintances on a daily basis, often just to check in and share updates or ask how everyone is doing. It's part of his routine, his way to stay connected and informed about what's happening around him. And just to clarify, his friends would tell you that he's a quiet, respectful young man, someone who prefers staying in his comfort zone rather than seeking trouble or engaging in reckless behavior. He's known for being calm, no history of conflicts or fights, and certainly no secret life hidden behind a facade. He's transparent and straightforward, a typical teenager who values his friendships and his own sense of stability. The fact that he suddenly stopped communicating, it was not just strange, it was downright frightening. By the time Tuesday arrived, the search organized by the police had expanded beyond the neighborhood, spreading into the streets of Miramar itself. Officers canvassed the area thoroughly, focusing on places like Sherman Circle and its surroundings. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, their efforts yielded a grim discovery. Hidden in the bushes near one of the apartment buildings, they uncovered a body. And it wasn't just any body. It was that of a young man, someone who looked remarkably like DJ. Let me take a step back and describe what happened inside the apartment complex where DJ resided. The scene was so close to his own home that it might have gone unnoticed had it not been for a distinct trail. A trail marked by a trail of bloodstains that stretched across the sidewalk, leading directly to where they found the victim. It was a chilling sight, revealing that DJ had been nearby all along, so close yet so out of reach. Moreover, a bloodied knife was also located in the grass nearby, adding another dark element to the grim tableau. As news of this tragic discovery spread quickly, DJ's family members arrived on the scene, their hearts pounding with a mixture of anguish and disbelief. They were desperate for answers, eager to understand what had transpired and why such a tragedy had befallen someone they loved. Police officers, trying to manage the chaos, approached the family with calm but firm instructions. "Please, just give us a few minutes," one officer pleaded gently. "We need to speak with you, but you should go back inside your home for now." They gently urged the family to step back, to stay out of the way while they secured the scene. "Can you please go back inside, just as I am asking?" another officer requested, their voice firm but empathetic. "An officer will come to speak with you shortly." The police cordoned off the area, stretching crime scene tape across stairwells and entrances, sealing off the scene to preserve evidence. They knew every detail could be crucial in unraveling the mystery behind this young man's death. Several detectives gathered around the body, carefully examining and documenting every piece of evidence, knowing that each fragment could lead them closer to the truth. One of the detectives summarized what they knew. "This all happened on Sunday. You saw the victim last on that day," He went missing that same Sunday. They observed the injuries inflicted upon the young man, 2 wounds, one in the neck and another in the chest, and saw how his body was dumped in the bushes as if he didn't matter, as if he was disposable. The victim's general appearance matched the description provided by DJ's family, who confirmed that it was indeed their loved one. However, the police remained cautious. They couldn't jump to conclusions or make any definitive statements until they completed their investigation and confirmed the identity beyond doubt. As the scene was meticulously processed, officers issued orders to restrict access further. Go around to the middle, they instructed. Ascend to the second floor, and ensure no one goes down the stairwell. Their aim was to secure the scene completely, preventing contamination and ensuring they collected every possible piece of evidence. The gravity of the situation was unmistakable, as they worked tirelessly to piece together what had transpired and to bring clarity to a case that brought immense pain to everyone involved. Alright, let's take a closer look at how this story unfolds, expanding on the details and providing a more fluid, engaging narrative while preserving the core facts and meaning. In the quiet neighborhood of Miramar, life usually proceeded at a calm and peaceful pace, where residents knew each other by name and differences were settled with good humor or neighborly goodwill. Everything changed suddenly when word spread through the community that a tragedy had occurred. A young person had been found dead under circumstances that alarmed everyone. News traveled fast, and soon there was a collective sense of shock and concern that swept through the neighborhood streets and homes. As the police arrived at the scene, they swiftly set up the necessary crime scene tape, sealing off the area and preventing any contamination of evidence. Alongside that, a detailed crime scene log was initiated, meticulously documenting every detail and every movement around the site, ensuring that no fragment of evidence would be overlooked. This process marked the beginning of an investigation that would require patience, precision, and careful attention to every lead. Back at the police headquarters in Miramar, the atmosphere was tense yet driven with a sense of urgency. As officers and investigators worked through the early stages of the case, a number of community members started showing up at the station. Their motivations varied. Some wanted to offer help, others sought to better understand what was happening. Among these visitors was a woman who carried with her not just concern, but a smartphone clutched tightly in her hand. This wasn't an ordinary device. It was a gateway into a private world. A group chat among teenagers that might hold crucial clues to understanding the tragic event. She approached the front desk, visibly distressed, and explained her situation. "Could you please give me a quick summary of what's happening?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm really sorry to bother you, but I need to know." Her words indicated her sense of urgency and her desperation to understand the unfolding crisis. "I saw on the news that they found a body near Sherman Circle, and they keep showing a picture of a boy who goes to Mir High. They aren't exactly saying it's him, but it's pretty obvious, right?" she continued, her eyes searching for some reassurance. The officer listened attentively, nodding softly before responding, "Yes, that's been the coverage. The authorities haven't confirmed it officially, but it looks like it's the same person." "What makes you think this could be related?" She hesitated for a moment, then explained how her niece's phone was flooded with texts. On her phone, all the messages come from her friends. There are conversations from other students at school, and it's clear that they're talking about him. They all seem to know it's him. Everyone's trying to figure out what's going on, but I don't really know what to believe. I don't understand what's happening," she added, her voice filled with worry. The officer asked whether she or her niece had spoken directly to any detectives or law enforcement officials. "No, I haven't talked to anyone yet. I just came here because my niece told me she got these messages yesterday, Sunday, and she saw him that day. She said it was the most traumatizing experience of her life, and she's really upset about it," the woman explained, tears beginning to form in her eyes. She continued, "My thoughts are racing. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I have to be honest, this situation is terrifying. I know she's involved in some gang activity, or at least she's associated with it, and I'm worried about what these messages mean. I'm not accusing her of anything, but I also can't ignore what I saw. It's complicated, and I just want to protect her." Her voice faltered slightly, emphasizing her concern for her niece's safety and mental well-being. "I don't want the messages to be shared publicly or to become a part of this case," she added. "I'm worried about her being identified or judged unfairly. If those texts are published, it could really harm her, especially if the girl who sent them is who she claims to be. Please, make sure her name stays out of it as much as possible." The officer nodded reassuringly, understanding her worries. "We'll handle this carefully. We're not here to accuse anyone prematurely. We want the facts, and we'll respect everyone involved. Thank you for coming and for sharing this information." The woman's concern was clear, not just about the investigation, but also about her niece's future and safety. She handed over the phone, requesting that it be kept confidential and that her niece's name be protected within the data. "Please, if you can, write on there not to include her name or any identifying details. I just want to ensure she's protected, especially if this girl really is who she claims to be," she urged, her voice filled with cautious hope. The officer responded empathetically, assuring her that her request would be respected. With that, the woman stepped back, feeling a small measure of relief but still worried about what lay ahead. Meanwhile, law enforcement officials understood that they now had tangible evidence, an electronic device containing crucial communications, potentially connecting the victim to others and possibly revealing the events leading up to the tragedy. By the following Wednesday, forensic teams confirmed what the entire community had begun to fear. The deceased was indeed DJ Grant. As the grim reality settled in, investigators faced a broader question that loomed large. Who had been responsible for this act, and what had motivated such violence? The initial perceptions among some members of the community suggested that the group chat, filled with youthful chatter and gossip, might not be of much importance. However, the detectives knew better than to underestimate the significance hidden within those messages. Careful scrutiny of the text exchanges revealed a disturbing pattern. Certain names kept recurring, 3 in particular: 17-year-old Andre Dexter Clemens, 16-year-old Jacine Smith, and 17-year-old Christy Parisian. These names, once seemingly just part of teenage banter, quickly became the central focus of the investigation. The content of their messages resembled more than mere casual chats. They appeared to contain references that could directly connect these individuals to the recent violence against DJ Grant. Time was of the essence. Without delay, law enforcement officials intensified their efforts, knowing that each passing moment was critical in bringing the truth to light and ensuring justice for the young victim. They moved swiftly to gather evidence from these suspects and the digital footprints that linked them to the tragic events, aiming to unravel the complex motives behind DJ's death and to account for the role played by everyone involved. As soon as the officers identified the names linked to the case, they quickly shifted their focus toward locating the teenagers involved. They wasted no time in mobilizing their resources to find and bring the youths into custody or, at the very least, to question them about the recent events. Their sense of urgency was palpable, a reflection of the seriousness of the situation. Consequently, law enforcement officers showed up promptly at the residence of Chrissy Parisian, a young girl whose address was connected to the investigation. The officers arrived with purpose, knocking firmly on the front door of her home. Moments later, her mother appeared at the door, looking visibly confused and caught off guard by the unexpected visitors. She was unsure why law enforcement was there and appeared uncertain about the purpose of their visit. The officers identified themselves as representatives of the Mayar Police Department, establishing their authority and confirming the legitimacy of their presence. One officer addressed the woman politely but directly, initiating conversation. "Good afternoon, ma'am. How are you doing today?" he asked with a professional tone. She responded hesitantly, indicating that she was waiting for her sister to arrive so they could go somewhere together, perhaps implying that she wasn't expecting any visitors that day. The officer then inquired further, seeking to clarify the situation. "Are you the only one in the household at the moment?" he asked. She confirmed her identity. "My daughter isn't here right now, it's just me." He pressed gently, asking if anyone else was inside the residence. She affirmed that no one else was present. The officers then requested her cooperation, politely asking if she would be willing to step outside with them for a moment to speak privately. Surprised, she questioned the suggestion but agreed, following them outside the house to continue the conversation. Outside, the officers took care to explain the situation clearly, ensuring she understood what was happening and what steps would follow. They carefully articulated that an ongoing investigation involved her daughter and the circumstances surrounding her, which made the situation delicate. One officer clarified, "At this point, we're conducting an investigation, and your daughter's name has come up in connection with it." Her mother's concern grew evident as she confirmed, "Yes, she's my daughter." The officers then delivered an important piece of information. They needed to keep her out of the house temporarily. "For now," they explained, "we're going to have to keep you outside, away from the residence." While the remark might have sounded straightforward, it underscored the fact that an investigation was ongoing, and certain precautions needed to be taken. The officer made sure to emphasize that this directive was not personal and was simply part of their procedure. She asked with concern, "Me? Why me? What's going on?" Her voice sounded uncertain, reflecting her confusion and worry. The officer reassured her, saying that this was standard procedure and that nobody else needed to stay inside at the moment, provided that no additional individuals were present. She mentioned her sister was at work, so she was alone at the house. The officers confirmed that no other people were inside, only she was standing outside with her shoes still on. They reassured her once again, emphasizing that she was the only occupant in the residence at that time and that nobody else was inside during the initial stages of their investigation. The officers made it clear that further legal steps were already in motion. They informed her that a search warrant was in the process of being obtained, which would allow them to enter and thoroughly investigate the house. One officer explained calmly, "We have detectives working on securing a search warrant, which is standard procedure in situations like this." She listened intently, perhaps overwhelmed by the rapid developments. The officers continued, "Until the warrant arrives and the house has been searched, we need to ensure that no one enters or leaves the premises." They explained that they would proceed to secure the residence, close the door, and wait for the legal documents authorizing their entry. She was visibly anxious as she asked if she could retrieve her phone before the search commenced, hoping to contact her sister or perhaps other family members. She politely requested permission, stating, "Can I take my phone so I can call my sister?" Her tone was pleading, hoping for some small mercy in the otherwise tense situation. The officers, however, maintained a firm stance. One responded, "At this point, we've already informed you that no one can go back inside the house." Despite her insistence, they reiterated that protocol had to be followed strictly, and no personal belongings could be removed from the premises until the search was completed. She then asked again if her phone could be checked or temporarily held so she could make a call. "Could you check my phone for me? It's right there," she pleaded, trying to reason with the officers. The officers explained that they were obligated to adhere to standard procedures, emphasizing that their primary concern was ensuring the integrity of the investigation. "We really must follow the proper protocol in this situation," they explained calmly. In the end, the house became sealed off, and the law enforcement officials explained that all rules and procedures had to be strictly observed. The residence was now off limits until the search warrant was authorized, executed, and the investigation completed. The officers patiently conveyed that their actions were necessary to proceed lawfully and thoroughly but recognized that the process was invasive. Her rights, although temporarily limited, were part of ensuring a proper and lawful investigation, even if it felt unsettling in the moment. She even inquired whether an officer could bring her the item she desperately needed, yet her request was met with the same stiff refusal. The officers were unwavering. No one was permitted to step inside the house or the premises until the official search warrant arrived. Consequently, she found herself standing outside alongside the officers, her demeanor composed yet tense, trying her best to maintain her composure amid the unfolding tense situation. As they remained outside, she took a moment to share with the officers that her daughter had sent her a voice message earlier in the day, which touched upon the murder. She explained that during the investigation, the officers apparently had overlooked the standard protocol. They had taken her daughter's phone so she could show them the voice message. Her explanation was that her daughter wanted to make a statement at the police station regarding her phone, intending to return home soon, and that she herself had been told her phone was seized. She added softly that her daughter indicated she would soon be back home and that her phone was in her possession. The officers confirmed they had taken the phone into evidence, understanding her concern but noting that was necessary for the investigation. Christy, the daughter, had stated that she was being taken to the police station to provide an official statement. She was without her phone at that moment because it had been confiscated, but she assured her mother that she would be home shortly. By this point, the police had already spoken with Christy at the station, gathering her account. Eventually, the officer returned her daughter's phone back to her mother, but there was little else she could contribute at that moment to aid the investigation. Then, the officers informed her that no family member was allowed to leave the scene or vicinity until further notice. "Are you planning to stay around here?" one of the officers asked. "Are you going to be sticking around, or do you plan to leave?" they inquired again. "Leaving where?" she responded, puzzled by the question. "You're not going anywhere, right?" the officer pressed. "No, I was just going to the police station," she replied, confused about the purpose of their questions. "Not right now," the officer clarified. "We mean, are you planning to go somewhere immediately?" "I'm just heading to the police station to find out what happened," she explained. "That's all," she added firmly. "To see what happened, that's it," she insisted. "I'm not going anywhere else because—" "What do you mean?" she questioned, feeling somewhat overwhelmed. "Honestly, even if you go to the police station, they probably won't tell you much," one officer remarked. "How old is your daughter?" another officer asked, trying to gauge the situation. "How old now?" she asked in return, alert to the importance of that detail. "She is 17, her mother answered, confirming her age. Because Christy was underage at the time, her mother had the legal right to be present during any questioning. Unfortunately, the police crossed several boundaries in this case. First, they questioned the minor at her home without a proper search warrant, which was a direct infringement of her constitutional rights. More troubling was their decision to interrogate Christy alone, without ensuring that a responsible adult was present to support her, despite her being under 18. These actions were deeply questionable and liable to challenge legally. Later that night, around 11 o'clock, officers managed to locate Jacine Smith and proceeded to her family's apartment. Their approach was outside, and they questioned her in the company of her mother, standing on the sidewalk. During the interrogation, Jacine was asked directly, "Did you hurt this person?" To which she responded honestly, "I didn't hit him or anything like that. I was simply told to push him so he wouldn't leave the court." She clarified further, expressing her confusion, "I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you," and elaborated, "I wasn't supposed to hit him, but I was told to push him to ensure he stayed in the court area at the time." The officers, having begun piecing together the details, found that her account aligned with bits of evidence they had already reviewed, which supported their suspicions. They reminded Jacine that they believed she was cooperative and that honesty was critical at this stage of the investigation. Her mother, understandably anxious, asked for clarity regarding her daughter's role, wanting to understand what exactly Jacine might be implicated in. "Please be honest with me," the mother pressed, seeking reassurance. "I've been completely truthful," Jacine responded sincerely. "I believe you," her mother said softly, "but I need to know, does what you said, or what you did, tie you to what happened? Do you think this might connect you to the incident in any way?" she asked earnestly, seeking full transparency from her daughter about her involvement or lack thereof. "I'm not entirely sure what actually transpired, but from what you're telling me, it seems that someone directed you to do something, yet I have no clarity on what exactly your actions were. I'm not aware of the specific things you did, nor do I know what you might have failed to do. The full details escape me at this moment. It's almost as if someone instructed you to take certain steps, but the precise nature of those steps remains unclear. I want to understand exactly what happened, but the details are hazy, and I need to piece them together carefully." She mentioned that she was told to keep him confined or cornered. "That much I understand. Andre explained to me that someone had upset him or that there was some involvement with another person's girlfriend or a girl, to be more precise. According to him, the situation revolved around some girl, and his anger had escalated to the point where he felt he needed backup for what he called a fight. He insisted it was just a matter of settling a dispute, a fight, nothing more. Jacine had been instructed to trap DJ in the stairwell, and the reason behind this was related to a girl, as well. Andre had asked for support, for backup for what he termed a fight. It's important that both of you understand this clearly because I've already addressed this situation with you earlier, at a different time, but I want to make sure everything is clear now. Remember, you aren't obligated to stay here. You're not required to speak with me if you choose not to. It's crucial for you to understand that I have no intention of arresting your child, so you can rest assured about that. However, I want to be completely honest and transparent with you. Your daughter is only 16 years old, and because of her age, I must listen to what she has to say. That's why I'm here, to hear her perspective. I just wanted to emphasize this point again because I mentioned it to you previously, but at that time, she wasn't present, and I want to ensure you fully grasp the situation now. Do you understand what I am saying?" Do you follow what I mean? I do understand what you're telling me. I hear your words clearly. But at the same time, I am worried. I don't want to go to some police station, leave without my daughter, and come back only to find her gone. That's my biggest fear. I'm just trying to tell you that you don't have to do that. You're free to leave if you want, but the house must stay secured and under proper control. The officers explained that the people involved were free to leave if they preferred, but the house needed to remain locked down and secure. Slowly, the pieces of the puzzle were fitting together, but there was still one more person whose whereabouts and involvement the investigators desperately needed to determine. That person was Jacine Smith, and she appeared willing to speak. Her willingness to talk was evident because her mother didn't intervene or try to stop her. So, the officers listened closely as Jacine began to recount her version of events, which dramatically shifted the perspective of the case. Jacine insisted that Andre was the true mastermind behind everything that transpired. She claimed he had orchestrated the entire plan down to the smallest detail, even selecting the color of the dress she needed to wear. She recounted that he had instructed her to dress entirely in black and follow his lead without question. I was told to dress in all black and follow him, Jacine explained, confirming that she was obedient to his demands. She added that he helped her prepare for what he later called a fight, though the overall tone of her words implied that it was more than just a simple altercation. It was a carefully staged event. She further stated that everything went as planned. They waited and walked all the way to the designated location, then proceeded up the stairs, where Chrissy was already waiting. Chrissy, Jacine revealed, had been stationed there with a specific purpose: to lure DJ out, making sure he would come into the trap. Jacine described Chrissy's role as seductive, implying that her actions were calculated and intentional. From what Jacine knew, Chrissy had successfully seduced DJ, and this wasn't just accidental. It was part of an overall scheme designed to manipulate or entrap him. As the officers listened to Jacine's account, it became evident that the investigation was still in progress. They weren't ready to make any formal arrests just yet, since they needed more information to connect all the pieces properly. But Jacine understood, deep down, that the authorities' arrival was inevitable. She already sensed that the police would show up eventually, and it seemed that she was beginning to brace herself for what was to come. Inside her, there was an uneasy acceptance, a silent acknowledgement that her involvement in these events could lead to serious consequences. She admitted that she had been trying to suppress what had happened, attempting to pretend it hadn't occurred, even though she knew that it was inevitable that law enforcement would arrive at some point. This awareness had already started to prepare her emotionally, mentally bracing her for the worst possible outcomes. Her mother then asked her, with a mixture of concern and curiosity, what she meant by preparing herself for the police's eventual arrival. Jacine's response was thoughtful, perhaps a bit hesitant, but she acknowledged that she had been trying to get ready for what the future might hold. She understood that the confrontation with the authorities was unavoidable and had started mentally and emotionally preparing herself for that confrontation long before it actually happened. If they decide to push me away, Mom, and turn me aside, I want you to understand that I am fully aware of my involvement in everything that has transpired. Based on all the things I have already shared, I know without any doubt that I am considered an accomplice in what has happened. I am deeply sorry for this, and I recognize the gravity of what my participation means. Mom, she understood perfectly well what her involvement entailed. She knew, with complete clarity, that she played a role alongside others in this chain of events. Now, the story had begun to take a definite shape, one that was increasingly difficult to ignore. In this narrative, one teenager had lost his life, and Jacine Smith, in her effort to cooperate with the authorities, had provided investigators with all the necessary details. The motive behind the act and the identity of the person who had set everything into motion. That person was Andre Clemens. Jacine explained to the detectives that Andre was not just upset. He was driven by a desire for revenge, and importantly, he did not want to carry out this vengeance alone. He had sought help, and others had been involved. Inside the police vehicle, with her mother sitting nearby, Jacine recounted the events in a manner that was both calm and careful. Her tone was measured, but she was meticulous, making sure to provide a clear and precise timeline from the very beginning. She explained that even before the events of that distressing Sunday, there was an earlier communication, before Andre came over to her place. She identified Andre as a fellow student from her school, someone she knew well. When asked about his last name, she confirmed it was Clemens, establishing his identity further. She clarified his academic standing, knowing that he was a senior student that year, a fact that painted a clearer picture of the social environment they navigated daily. The officers sought to understand the details of her interactions with Andre. Jacine stated that Andre had approached her earlier, on the day before the tragic incident, expressing that he was dealing with a difficult situation and needed assistance with a fight. She recounted that he had told her he had some sort of problem that required him to take action and asked if she could help him out during this time. Having a history of getting into fights themselves in elementary school and acknowledging that she had been somewhat unruly and even aggressive outside of school during her younger years, she decided to help her friend. She agreed, given that Andre was someone she considered a good friend, and she thought it was just about a fight, something she felt she could manage. Andre was aware of her reputation for having fought during her earlier school years, and he knew she was not someone new to physical confrontations. As the police officer listened, he nodded attentively, signaling that it was okay for Jacine to continue her story without interruption. She then proceeded to describe the plan Andre had laid out for that day. He told her that he would come to her house around 6 o'clock in the evening, but he actually arrived closer to 6:45 or even 7 in the evening. When he finally showed up, Andre began explaining the entire plan to her, outlining what they needed to do to carry out their assault. He instructed her on what to wear, specifically, dark clothing she wouldn't mind throwing away afterward. She was to dress all in black, with gloves, and also wear some sort of protective gear for her hair. The reason for these instructions was to avoid leaving traces of evidence and to make sure they could carry out their task smoothly. Andre detailed the entire layout of the building they were to approach, providing her with all the details about what they needed to accomplish. He told her exactly what she should bring, clothes she didn't care about, gloves, and protective covering for her hair, and explained how everything should be prepared in advance. She remembered that he asked her to wear the clothes she would be willing to discard later, knowing full well that she was involved in something serious. She was to wait in anticipation once they were dressed and ready, and then they would leave the house together to go to their destination. Her instructions were clear. Get dressed, wait for the signal, and then proceed. Andre's instructions extended to every detail of their plan, and Jacine followed them meticulously. She recounted that her mother had gone back home after they finished preparing, and they had told her they were heading out for a walk. Without hesitation, she, Andre, and Chrissy left the house and their neighborhood, making their way down the street and out of the complex. Andre explained further that the whole purpose of their outing was related to a confrontation with a certain individual. He told her that the person they targeted was someone Andre and she, along with Chrissy, intended to lure out by using a seduction tactic. According to Andre, this person had previously caused trouble by messing with a girl he knew. That was part of the reason why they were planning to confront him. The details of the plan, the preparations, and the motivation all painted a darker picture, revealing that their actions had been carefully orchestrated over days leading up to the tragic event. Alright, here is the revised and expanded version of the provided text, rephrased with careful attention to clarity, flow, and detail, resulting in a richly developed narrative that is approximately 2 times longer than the original. The information I received was clear and unambiguous. This was what had been conveyed to me directly. Andre had carefully explained to Jacine that a certain DJ had been involved in some inappropriate or potentially harmful actions with a girl he knew personally. From Andre's account, it wasn't a superficial flirtation or casual teasing. It had evidently escalated beyond that, into something more serious and personal. The officers attentively listened as Jacine recounted the details, her words flowing as she kept describing the series of events. As Jacine continued, she detailed how, during the planning phase, Andre had laid out the entire route they intended to take. He had been very specific, explaining precisely where they would walk, how they would move through different areas, and what actions they would perform along the way. He had also emphasized the importance of waiting patiently for a clear signal before proceeding with any further steps. Throughout her recounting, she kept emphasizing how in her mind, at the time, everything seemed to boil down to nothing more than a confrontation, just a fight. She remembered thinking that it was straightforward, reactive, and not as complicated as it was later made out to be. Andre, according to Jacine, had made it very clear that they had to wait for this predetermined signal before they advanced into the next phase of their plan. Jacine remembered that she did not question or resist this instruction. Instead, she simply went along. It was a different era, a different mindset, and she felt it necessary to follow through with what they had agreed upon. She then began to walk the detectives through each step of their journey, component by component. She recalled that they had entered the complex through its front gates, moving carefully but deliberately. When asked if she remembered the name of the complex, she hesitated briefly but then clarified that she didn't know the official name. However, what she did remember was that it was the adjacent residential area next to their old house, the one where they used to live. This detail made the story start to solidify in the detectives' minds, as bits of the plan and the location became clearer with each passing moment. Still, Jacine wasn't finished yet. She added more depth to her narrative, revealing how meticulously they had prepared for this encounter. She explained that they had taken specific precautions to conceal their identities. They had worn gloves, with 2 pairs each, to prevent leaving fingerprints. From head to toe, they were dressed entirely in black hoodies, black pants, black shoes, aiming for maximum concealment. Their clothing also included do-rags that covered their eyebrows and facial hair, effectively hiding any distinguishable facial features. They even wore masks that fully concealed their faces, making identification even more difficult. She continued, describing how they had exited their hideout and approached the staircase within that complex. She mentioned that, during their movement, the other person involved had instructed her to shift her position slightly to avoid being caught on security cameras. Jacine remembered walking carefully through specific areas while adhering strictly to the plan. She explained that at one point, the suspect told her there were no cameras in that particular stairwell, which allowed them to relax a little, feeling more at ease and less cautious. Her narrative suggested that their main purpose was to avoid detection entirely, to keep their plans under cover. She speculated that the reason for wearing all black, for using multiple layers of gloves, hoodies, and face coverings, was to prepare for a physical confrontation. She thought that the involvement of violence was a real possibility, especially considering how visibly upset the person was about the situation involving the girl and the DJ. She presumed that the overall goal was to fight, possibly with some elements of bloodshed involved, but she also thought they wanted to avoid leaving evidence such as bloodstains or other signs that might reveal their identities or their actions. The entire ensemble, 2 sets of gloves, hoodies, do-rags, and masks, was carefully chosen to hide their facial features and hairlines, ensuring they remained as anonymous as possible. The detectives listened carefully as Jacine continued, knowing that she still had more details to share. She recounted how they had walked up the stairs inside the complex while the girl, Chrissy, had remained downstairs. Chrissy had made a call or sent a message to confirm her arrival, possibly updating someone on their location or status, while Jacine and the suspect remained upstairs. Jacine described the atmosphere as relaxed. They were simply talking, seemingly calm despite the tension involved. Suddenly, they received a signal from Chrissy, indicating it was time to move back downstairs. Following the signal, they descended the stairs, and Jacine remembered that her companion had told her to wait at the top of the staircase. She also recalled that he had brought with him a weapon, though she did not specify what kind it was. She remembered that he handed her the weapon to hold onto it briefly, but beyond that, she kept her description vague. They still had their gloves on at that point, and she didn't provide any further details about the weapon itself. They moved down the stairs together. Her companion approached the young man they had targeted, who was downstairs with Chrissy, while Chrissy herself had stepped back and continued to walk down the stairs. In her account, she explicitly stated that she did not recognize the boy they approached, nor did she have prior knowledge or familiarity with him. She was questioned closely about this, likely to determine whether she knew who she was dealing with. Yet her answer remained consistent: she did not recognize the individual. When asked specifically about the weapon, she used a particular word, weapon, but was strikingly restrained and non-descriptive. She was very specific about every other element of the story, describing the clothing, the route taken, the planning, and the preparations in great detail, but when it came to the weapon itself, she kept her explanation intentionally vague, omitting any specifics such as type, size, or appearance. This meticulousness in her account, focusing on everything except the weapon's details, suggested a deliberate effort to conceal some aspect of the incident, or perhaps an awareness that certain specifics could incriminate her or others involved. Her retelling was precise enough to reconstruct their movements and intentions without revealing more than she was willing or able to disclose about the firearm they carried that day. We are already aware that DJ sustained 2 injuries during the incident. From this fact alone, it becomes quite clear that the wounds could not have been caused by a firearm, which typically leaves different, telltale marks and damage. So, the question naturally arises. Why was this detail, this crucial piece of information, deliberately left out or overlooked earlier? The answer to that, as it turns out, will be revealed later in this interview, and I can assure you, it will be truly shocking. So I advise you to stay focused and keep listening. Soon after, the scene escalated when the young boy attempted to make a frantic dash away from the confrontation. The chaos unfolded after Andre approached him, apparently alerted to some problem or tension. In that tense moment, Andre paused and made it clear with words that there was a significant issue at hand, something that couldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, I found myself standing behind them with a weapon in hand, unsure of what would happen next, but ready to intervene if necessary. Andre then turned to me and explained the situation. Chrissy, who was nearby, looked at me as well, and in that moment, the boy saw an opening and took off running. He bolted in an attempt to escape, and I had a fleeting thought. The weapon Andre held was probably just meant to intimidate, something to scare him into submission, not to actually harm. Instinctively, I decided to put the weapon down, thinking that perhaps I was overreacting or that this was just a tense moment that would pass. Without hesitation, I hurried after him and, along with Andre, managed to catch up. We tackled him, bringing him to the ground in a swift, coordinated effort. Chrissy, who was also involved, helped Andre subdue him, and together, we managed to hold him down, believing, at first, that the goal was merely to keep him physically restrained, maybe to scare him further or to prevent him from running again. But what was happening was far more serious than just a typical altercation or an act of intimidation. The weapon Andre carried was not merely for show or as a threat. It was part of a carefully planned and sinister act. This was not just a fight. It was a premeditated assault, with murder deliberately set into motion by a teenage boy unable to control his destructive rage. Jacine, who was close enough to witness the events, described how Andre confronted DJ directly. The confrontation was intense, filled with raw emotion, as Andre unleashed the full extent of his anger, frustration spilling over as he faced the boy. During this confrontation, Andre was talking to DJ, expressing how deeply upset he was, venting all his pent-up emotions. He made it clear that these feelings had reached a breaking point. In a chilling declaration, Andre reportedly said to DJ, "You know what I have to do, right? That I have to hurt you. Like, I have to get you back for what you did." These words alone revealed the deadly intent behind the confrontation. DJ, clearly terrified, responded desperately, pleading for his life and safety. He told Andre, "You don't have to do this. I won't bother you. I won't say anything. I haven't seen you guys before. I won't say anything, nothing at all." His words showed a plea for mercy, a desperate attempt to avoid violence. I could see in that moment that DJ probably thought Andre might just slap or punch him, believing it would end there, that it was just a heated fight, nothing more. He was likely hoping that the confrontation would be over quickly, with no lasting damage. Despite his plea, I knew that the situation was far more dangerous. DJ's plea was filled with sincerity, but the story revealed a darker truth. The violence was already underway, and it was escalating beyond mere intimidation. DJ's pleas seemed to have little effect on Andre, who, instead of backing down, had already made up his mind. Andre asked Jacine for the weapon, a request that seemed surreal given the context. She handed it over, still under the illusion that perhaps this was some twisted joke or a moment of reckless bravado. Their friendship had always been characterized by playful roughhousing, inside jokes, and a sense of sibling-like camaraderie. It had never seemed threatening or hostile before. It was the kind of bond that involved teasing and joking around, not violence. But this time, everything changed. Andre took the weapon and pushed the boy into a corner, trapping him there as he begged for his life, pleading not to be hurt. I was watching this unfold, thinking that Andre might just strike him or deliver some sort of blow. Andre then directed me to come closer and help him. I hesitated briefly, thinking I could allow him to do whatever he planned, whether hitting or punching, and I stood there, holding the boy, uncertain of how far Andre would go. Suddenly, Andrei launched into a rapid series of punches, his actions aggressive and relentless. The atmosphere grew tense and dark, with chaos and danger mounting with each passing second. Chrissy, observing the situation, began to grow more anxious. She noticed that several cars had arrived, and more importantly, there were bystanders, children and adults alike, watching from a safe distance. She urged Andrei to finalize his actions quickly, pushing him to hurry up, sensing that this escalating violence could soon spiral out of control. "There are many cars here," she said softly but firmly, "and plenty of people watching. The children are out. You need to finish and we need to leave." Her nerves were beginning to show as the tense scene carried on. The details of what was happening next only darkened further, revealing a disturbing progression from a heated confrontation to outright violence. Jacine continued describing the events, each detail painting a clearer picture of a moment that was spiraling beyond what anyone could have anticipated or wished for. "Certainly. Here's a deeply reworked, expanded, and polished version of the provided text, crafted to be about 2 to 3 times longer while preserving the original meaning and details." The individual in question then reached into his pocket or bag and pulled out a small firearm, which he seemed to be preparing to use. I remember thinking, is he actually going to go through with this? I could sense the tension rising, but before I had a chance to react further, he attempted to carry out whatever he had planned. My instinct told me he was trying to fire or threaten with the weapon, but he was obviously struggling or unsure, and his efforts were proving unsuccessful. I watched him as he fumbled, failing to get the firearm to work properly. At that moment, I found myself in a position that allowed me to see what was happening closely. I was holding onto his legs, keeping him immobilized by gripping both of his limbs firmly. The way I was positioned was such that I was wrapped around his lower torso, providing some control over his movements. As I held him, I suddenly felt a sharp poke or jab, something pressing against my side or back, and I instinctively looked down, my mind immediately curious about what that could be. It was then that I noticed the other boy, who was also present, wielding a weapon of some sort. He appeared to be waving it around, perhaps trying to keep himself from being harmed or to threaten the others involved. This second boy had, at some point, pulled out a smaller weapon, maybe a knife or a similar object, adding another layer of danger and chaos to the scene. I saw him pressing or stabbing at something, likely aiming at the first individual. The exact placement of this act was on or near the neck, specifically on the back of the neck or possibly on the side of the neck on the right. The scene was tense, with fear and violence intersecting, and I was trying to process what was unfolding right before my eyes. Meanwhile, Jacine, who was present during all of this, later admitted that she didn't fully know what Andrei's ultimate plan was. She confessed that her involvement was primarily to hold the victim still during the chaos. Even after the violence had begun, she claimed she continued to restrain him, perhaps out of fear or confusion. Her account was already startling enough, but what came next was even more shocking to the detectives. Jacine revealed that DJ, the victim, was slipping in and out of consciousness, clearly deteriorating as the situation escalated. He was, according to Jacine, in a state of distress, his consciousness coming and going, and in a desperate attempt to get some mercy or even to end his suffering, he had spoken certain words to Andrei. DJ reportedly said, "If you're going to kill me, just choke me out or end it," indicating his understanding that death was near and requesting a quick mercy to avoid a more painful demise. His words showed a level of resignation. He was clearly pleading for his pain to be stopped. Despite this plea, Andrei did not immediately stop. Instead, he continued to manipulate the situation. Jacine, who claimed to have been observing this, said that DJ's resistance weakened as he realized there was no escape. Andrei went on and stabbed DJ again, delivering another blow that ultimately led to DJ stopping all resistance and succumbing to his wounds. When asked by the detectives why he didn't try to fight back or escape, Jacine explained that DJ simply gave up after that second stabbing, losing all strength to resist. The investigators pressed her further, urging her to share every detail she remembered, and Jacine proceeded to continue her narrative. After the victim was no longer a threat or any longer able to fight back, the next phase of the plan was clearly to clear away any evidence of what had transpired. Jacine recounted that Andrei had instructed her and another individual named Chrissy to retrieve cleaning supplies. This was part of the effort to erase traces of the violence. She described how the gloves they were using, which were intended as protection, had begun to tear and rip, making her increasingly nervous and scared. Yet, despite her fears, she concealed her emotions and maintained the facade of compliance, telling herself that showing her fears might give them away or worsen the situation. She explained that she was determined to follow orders without resistance, suppressing her own feelings of panic and doubt. Her main focus was on survival, and she told herself simply to do what was asked, no questions, no objections. She kept her fears bottled up, not revealing her inner panic, because she was afraid of what might happen if she showed her true feelings. Her story painted her as someone swept along by circumstances, unable to oppose the others involved, especially Andrei, whom she seemed to implicitly trust or fear. By framing her actions as nothing more than unknowing compliance, Jacine made herself out to be a passive participant caught up in a situation beyond her control. She insisted that her role was limited to mere cooperation, portraying herself as someone who had gone along only because she was too scared to do otherwise. She believed she was simply trying to survive and that she lacked the courage or strength to resist. However, such stories, even when detailed, are not immune to doubt. Lies sometimes unravel, especially when pieces of a story don't quite fit or when inconsistencies emerge. And eventually, the truth, or at least bits of it, began to surface. Jacine's narrative contained a critical slip-up, revealing a deeper involvement in the events than she initially admitted. She inadvertently divulged information that connected her more directly to the plan, pulling her into the core of the crime she was trying to describe. She then confessed that she had assisted Andrei in moving the victim, DJ, in a specific direction. Under the surveillance camera footage that the detectives had reviewed, she described how she helped Andrei push DJ towards a cluster of bushes nearby. She said they both had been exhausted and famished, having not eaten anything for a considerable time, which added to their physical weakness. According to Jacine, Andrei told her to guide DJ into the bushes and leave him there, with the understanding that they would determine what to do next at a later time. Her words indicated a sense of resignation and complicity, along with the acknowledgement that they had further plans for the victim. She also revealed that this was not her first encounter with such violence. Jacine stated that Andrei had told her this was the first person he had ever killed, a piece of information that shocked the investigators even more. This particular detail suggested a level of hesitation or lack of experience on Andrei's part, hinting that the events might have been more impulsive or poorly planned than initially assumed. The revelation added a new layer to the narrative, casting a different light on the individuals involved and their motivations. Throughout her account, Jacine's words painted a complex picture of fear, obedience, and an attempt to cling to innocence or minimize her role. Nonetheless, the details she unwittingly disclosed began to unravel her story, exposing cracks in her version of events and bringing her closer to the tragic truth behind what had transpired. Note: **** numbers are written out in full, as requested. If you'd like me to adapt the format or include additional stylistic elements, please let me know. Before he had revealed his intentions to Julia, there was a moment when they were just at the house, engaged in a lengthy conversation about the overall plan, the intricate details of what they aimed to do and what was likely to happen next. During that entire discussion, he never once mentioned to her that he was planning to kill someone, not even hinting at it in passing. It was only at a later point, during a different moment, that he made that shocking claim, an admission that marked the first time he explicitly disclosed such deadly intentions. The clarification was vital for the investigation because it indicated that this was the initial public acknowledgement of his murderous plan. When the authorities began piecing everything together, this revelation served as a critical piece of evidence. For now, the story would pause here, with the understanding that he had committed to this drastic act, which was now in motion. I will ask her whether they were going to leave after that, as the plan was progressing, and whether she was involved or simply a witness to the unfolding events. Jacine later recounted that Andrei had confided in her that this was the very first person he had ever intended to kill. She emphasized that he didn't say such a thing impulsively, in a moment of rage or panic, but rather during conversations they had while planning everything meticulously at his house. This detail implied that Jacine had been aware of the murderous intentions from the very beginning, even as the process was still in the planning stages, long before the actual act took place. However, later statements brought certain inconsistencies to the surface, revealing cracks in her story. The detectives, carefully analyzing her account, noted that her earlier version painted her as someone somewhat unaware of the full extent of the plan. Yet, now, she appeared to be admitting knowledge of the murder plot that conflicted with her previous claim of innocence or limited awareness. The more Jacine talked, the clearer it became that her involvement might have been more significant than she initially let on. Her earlier depiction of herself as a passive participant was slowly unraveling, revealing her to be perhaps more deeply entwined in these sinister events than she had previously indicated. Adding a startling twist to the case, the detectives uncovered a crucial detail about the weapon André used during the attack. It wasn't merely a small knife but something much more formidable, a weapon that would have been difficult to conceal, especially given the circumstances. Initially, they believed it to be a knife, possibly hidden in his clothing or carried in a pocket. But then, Jacine mentioned that there was a longer, more formidable object found in the vicinity, something she described as a sword. This piece of information drastically altered the case's perspective because, unlike a small knife that could be easily tucked away or hidden in a bag or clothing, a sword is a much larger, unwieldy item. It would stand out and be conspicuous, particularly for someone walking from her apartment to the complex where they were. From the detective's point of view, it was hard to believe that Jacine and Christy Parisian could have failed to notice that André Clemens was carrying a sword, especially given its size and apparent presence. The notion that neither of them saw or recognized the sword during this critical period seemed implausible. Their inability to detect such a formidable weapon suggested that it might have been concealed carefully, or perhaps simply overlooked in the chaos. Nonetheless, now, the investigators had enough evidence to start reconstructing the sequence of events, aligning her statements with the physical evidence gathered. The questioning then turned to the moment of André's arrival at the house, before all these events unfolded. When he first appeared, Jacine recalled that he was accompanied by her and that he had a collection of items with him. She specified that the small objects, presumably knives or similar items, were part of a collection, though she hadn't seen all of them clearly. These smaller items were either in his pocket or stored in the bag that he had brought along. She remembered that one of these smaller objects had remained behind during their initial interactions, while he had taken a single small knife and also the larger sword with him when he left. She admitted that she hadn't seen the large sword directly at that initial point, only that she had observed a bag that contained it. Her reasoning was that she had noticed the bag, and because someone else had just taken everything out of the house behind them, she was uncertain about its exact contents. She believed that either the sword was in a jacket that André was wearing, or it was in an additional jacket or a bag, perhaps with Christy, since she didn't pay close attention. She acknowledged that she didn't get a clear look at the sword itself during that first visit. She was too distracted or inattentive to notice the finer details. Instead, her focus was on the general circumstances, the bag, and the clothing André had. The detectives could sense that Jacine was beginning to realize that her knowledge about the sword, the fact that she knew it was there before they left the house, was a critical point. It indicated that she was aware of the weapon's presence from the very start, which strongly suggested her involvement or at least a close familiarity with the entire plan. Now, to distance herself, Jacine claimed that André had only grabbed a small knife and the larger sword when they left the house, but she hastily added that she had not personally seen the sword at that moment. She merely assumed it was in the bag because she hadn't looked closely enough. The problem with this excuse was that the detectives weren't entirely convinced. While Jacine might not have directly seen the sword, their investigation had gathered enough information to raise suspicions, making her earlier assertion seem doubtful. In sum, what this case revealed was a web of lies, half-truths, and concealed details. Each statement Jacine made was carefully analyzed, revealing potential gaps in her story, especially regarding her awareness of the sword and André's intentions. The unfolding evidence painted a picture of a carefully orchestrated plan, with her involvement clearly more significant than she initially appeared willing to admit. The investigators now had substantial reason to pursue closer scrutiny into her actions and knowledge, aiming to piece together the full story behind the deadly events that had transpired. The scene was riddled with inconsistencies and gaps, making the entire case feel like a jigsaw puzzle missing several crucial pieces. There were simply too many holes, too many details that didn't quite add up or align logically. The authorities already had in their possession the teenager's confession, providing a foundation of clarity regarding her involvement. They also had reconstructed her detailed timeline of events leading up to the crime, which, at the time, seemed to fit together relatively neatly. Yet, despite this, there remained an elusive new element, an object that now entered the narrative with significant weight: a sword. This was a fresh clue, an unusual and prominent item that became the focus of their increasingly urgent investigation. The group of teenagers truly believed they'd executed what appeared to be the perfect crime. They managed to commit their act in broad daylight, in full view of countless passers-by, within a tucked-away stairwell located in the heart of a busy apartment complex. Such a choice of location was shocking in its audacity. They thought the overlooked corner, often bustling with foot traffic, would provide perfect cover. To their apparent surprise, they killed someone right there without anyone able to directly identify or confront them immediately. The scene was such that no clear eyewitnesses came forward, despite the crowded setting, making their crime seem almost undetectable at first glance. Moreover, the teenagers had taken meticulous steps to conceal their identities. They carefully ensured their faces remained hidden from the security cameras positioned around the building, presumably with masks or other disguises, in an effort to maintain anonymity. If not for a critical turning point, a breakthrough in the investigation, their hopes of escaping justice might have been realized. The key slip-up occurred when the teens' group chat messages eventually surfaced later on, revealing their plans, anxieties, or perhaps bragging, details that, in hindsight, proved vital. Had these communication records not been discovered, perhaps they might have believed their scheme was foolproof, and they could have successfully evaded capture altogether. But as so often happens in criminal investigations, what seemed like a tight cover-up began to fall apart when unexpected evidence appeared. The unraveling commenced when, after deciding to dispose of Grant's body, they pulled his remains into the nearby bushes, attempting to throw off any pursuers. Despite the mounting tension, they managed to rally enough composure to undertake a quick cleanup. They stuffed the weapons, clothing, and other suspicious items into a bag. Jacine, one of the teenagers, instinctively tucked this bag into her jacket, convinced that they had avoided detection and were in the clear. They then removed their gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints and made their way back toward Jacin's apartment complex. But their attempt to get rid of the evidence took a disastrous turn. They chose the most conspicuous and exposed place imaginable, a large, open grassy area clearly visible from neighboring apartments and windows. The teenagers staged a false sense of normalcy, setting a bonfire right there, pouring gasoline over the bloody clothes, and watching as flames rapidly engulfed the evidence, effectively destroying any traces of their crime. They sat around the fire, nervously chatting and exchanging anxious glances, overwhelmed by fear yet clinging to a faint hope that perhaps their deed would remain undetected forever. Their nervousness was palpable as they debated their next move, trying to convince themselves that they could get away with what they had done. However, that fragile hope was shattered in an instant when a security guard happened to notice them. Without warning, the scene shifted from one of smoldering secrecy to a moment of undeniable danger. The teenagers found themselves faced with a witness who had seen their actions unfold right in front of their eyes. This unexpected encounter marked a pivotal turning point in their story. It transformed their desperate attempt at concealment into an unavoidable confrontation with the truth. The security guard was not the only person who saw the teenagers near the bonfire. An alert resident, who observed what was happening from her own window and had been watching quietly, later approached the police and provided an eyewitness account of what she had witnessed. Her description was vivid and detailed, painting a clear picture of the scene she had observed that evening. She recounted how she saw the two girls just standing in close proximity to each other, yet not displaying much movement or evasive behavior. One of the girls, described as somewhat chubby, was seen shifting slightly from foot to foot, standing in the same spot but moving a little to and fro, perhaps out of nervousness. Meanwhile, a young man was seen moving around the fire, visibly engaged in pouring more gasoline onto it. The witness was asked, "What exactly did you see him throw? Was it a bottle or some other object?" She hesitated briefly, then clarified, "It looked like a standard gasoline container, the kind you usually see, those regular bottles, nothing unusual about it." She explained that he walked around the fire, repeatedly pouring the gasoline, causing the flames to grow larger and more aggressive as every liter, she estimated, was emptied on the burning clothes and the smoldering scene. The witness described how the young man kept circling the blaze, making the flames leap and crackle with each pass, intensifying the inferno. She then continued, describing what she saw next. Her voice was steady but tinged with concern as she told the officers, "And I don't really know what exactly was in that material he threw onto the fire, but it looked like some kind of fabric or cloth. It didn't resemble animal remains or anything like that, it just appeared to be some kind of clothing or similar material." Her recollection was vivid. She emphasized that it did not resemble a live animal, like a bird or a duck, which sometimes are seen in the area, but rather something fabric-based, possibly torn or discarded clothing. Her memories did not stop there. Confined in her account was a mental image that stayed with her, a crucial detail she later shared. She remembered seeing those same two individuals at the scene that night, the very same faces that she would later recognize on the news broadcasts. Only after viewing their faces broadcast on television did it all finally fall into place. Her detailed description aligned with the suspects, confirming her suspicion and solidifying her testimony. Yet, what truly caught the attention of the detective assigned to the case was not only her detailed narrative but also what occurred immediately after she left the scene. That sequence of events, the actions of those teenagers following the fire, was what raised even more questions and added a new layer of complexity to the investigation. Certainly. Here is a thoroughly reimagined and expanded version of your original text, crafted with a literary touch and ensuring clarity and flow, while preserving the core facts and nuances. When that dangerous fire suddenly erupted and started to spread across the dry grass, I found myself overwhelmed with concern, realizing that immediate action was essential. My instinct was to understand their intentions, knowing that they were teenagers, and that their reckless enthusiasm could quickly escalate into something far more dangerous. The fact that they had ignited the blaze on the grassy area made me feel particularly uneasy because it suggested that they might be aiming to push the flames further, potentially to the nearby structures or more vulnerable patches of vegetation. In my mind, I imagined how their youthful exuberance might drive them to see how far they could let the fire go, oblivious to the destruction they could cause. Given these worries, I opted to move away from the scene swiftly but cautiously. I didn't want to confront them directly, as I sensed that approaching teenagers in such a volatile moment might not be safe. For all I knew, they could become aggressive or unpredictable. Carefully, I began to walk, quickening my pace as I aimed to distance myself from the fiery developing situation. Without delay, I crossed the street toward the opposite side of Sherman Circle, which is part of the larger Lake Vista complex, specifically heading away from the area where the teenagers had gathered and where the burning was taking place. This route took me past the leasing offices, and I made my way to a safer spot, watching from afar and keeping an eye on their activity. The woman, who had initially tried to intervene or at least caution them, was also deeply alarmed by how easily the fire could expand and get out of control. Recognizing the threat, she moved deliberately toward where the teenagers had gathered around the bonfire, intending perhaps to intervene or to alert someone in authority. However, midway through her approach, she chose not to directly confront the teens. She judged that they might be dangerous, and engaging them could have been risky. Instead, she quickly decided to retreat, heading for the other side of the Lake Vista complex to put more distance between herself and potential trouble. Later, when the authorities arrived and questions were posed, she provided crucial details that helped clarify what she had seen. She was able to identify that she had glimpsed their figures clearly enough to recognize them if she encountered them again in the future. Although she didn't get a perfect view of their faces, she remembered their body shapes distinctly. Especially memorable was the girl with the noticeable braids. Her figure was quite distinctive, and seeing her in photographs afterward confirmed her mental image. She described her as somewhat chubby, with braids that stood out vividly in her memory. This detail stood out as a defining feature amidst the general chaos. She confirmed that she had immediately alerted the security guard about the fire, ensuring that help was on its way as quickly as possible. Her quick actions helped initiate the response from authorities, and she remembered detailing what she saw to the security personnel clearly. Particularly, she remembered the girl named Jacine, whose braids she found especially distinctive. Yet, amid her recollections, there was an undercurrent of something unspoken, the feeling that lingered in her mind long after the events. She pondered whether there was anything else about that night that struck her as unusual or noteworthy. After a moment of reflection, She admitted that little else came to mind beyond her awareness of the kids' emotional states. She remembered how they appeared visibly distressed, certainly shaken, yet, simultaneously, she detected a strange attitude beneath their fear. When she entered her apartment, the atmosphere still echoed with tension. She sensed the raw trauma that the children were experiencing. They likely felt terrified, yet, at the same time, she detected a chilling element. An unsettling sense that some of them believed that DJ Grant, the victim, somehow deserved what had happened to him. It was a disturbing contrast, panic mixed with a cold, rational conviction, as if they had convinced themselves that their actions were justified or inevitable. Immediately upon entering her apartment, she made her way to the balcony to glimpse whether the teenagers were still lingering nearby. But within moments, they had vanished as quickly as they had appeared. All that remained was the scorched grass where the fire had burned out, a stark reminder of how fleeting and unpredictable the situation had been. Though they looked scared, the overall impression she got was not merely one of fear but also of something more unsettling, an almost instinctual belief that they were justified in their behavior, that DJ Grant somehow deserved what transpired, regardless of the chaos and trauma. As the scene unfolded, her observations formed a chilling mosaic of panic, fear, and cold resolve. Despite her detailed eyewitness account, the gathered evidence, and the initial conversations she had with others, the police and detectives involved in the case knew that their investigation was far from over. They needed to verify every piece of information, cross-check her statements, and piece together an accurate timeline. Surveillance footage from the apartment complex played a crucial role in this process. The recordings confirmed much of what Jacine described, the three teenagers dressed entirely in black approaching the stairwell where the ambush would take place. One particular camera even captured the last moments of DJ Grant's life, showing him in the midst of confrontation, and another footage revealed the teenagers dragging his lifeless body toward the bushes, exactly as Jacine had observed. However, as investigators delved further into Jacine's narrative, they began to notice inconsistencies. Certain details in her story didn't quite align with the evidence or the footage. Some parts of her account seemed to differ subtly, raising questions about the exact sequence of events and the roles each individual played that night. This discrepancy urged the detectives to scrutinize her version of the story more carefully, seeking clarity and confirming the accuracy of her recollections amid the growing complexity of the case. This expanded and richly detailed narrative preserves the original facts and sequence of events while providing a more fluid, engaging storytelling style, increasing the length significantly and adding depth to each moment. In the aftermath of a harrowing investigation, law enforcement authorities confiscated the phones belonging to the young teenagers involved in this tragic incident. They meticulously examined every message, every conversation stored within those devices, hoping to uncover clues that might shed light on the sequence of events leading to the devastating outcome. It swiftly became evident that Jacine's initial assertion, that she believed the entire affair was merely a schoolyard fight, was simply not holding up under scrutiny. The detectives, upon reviewing the messages, uncovered a stark reality that completely contradicted her innocent explanation. One particular message, dated October 3rd, stood out with shocking clarity, revealing the disturbing mindset behind the group's alleged plan. In that message, Jacine expressed her sentiments in a blunt, uncompromising manner, stating, "I love your opinion and all, but it's spooky season, and my toes will be red to symbolize the blood I be stepping on after I viciously someone to death." This message was brutally frank, leaving no doubt about the violent intent lurking beneath the surface. The words left a chilling impression. Murder was clearly on their minds and was very likely to transpire in the near future. Jacine could no longer deny any connection to the deadly plan, especially when such explicit language came to light. Within a matter of days, the investigation moved swiftly, and law enforcement agencies tightened their grip on all three teenagers involved. Jacine Smith, Christy Parisian, and Andre Clemens were all apprehended, their freedom stripped away as they faced the consequences of their actions. Each of them was formally charged as an adult, a clear indication of the gravity of the crimes they were accused of. They shared identical charges of evidence tampering and conspiracy to commit murder, highlighting the coordinated and premeditated nature of what had transpired. In addition to these common charges, Jacine Smith and Christy Parisian faced further accusations: second-degree murder, reflecting the serious impact their alleged involvement had on the victim's family. The most severe charges, however, were reserved for Andre Clemens, the young man who ultimately delivered the fatal blow with a sword during the assault. His alleged role in planning, executing, and causing the victim's death earned him the most serious possible legal designation: first-degree premeditated murder. The courtroom was filled with palpable tension as the names and charges were read aloud, each representing a person's life irreparably changed. The confrontation with Jacine in particular was heartbreaking. She stood face to face with a family member, directly expressing her claim of ignorance concerning her son's fate. She reportedly told the grieving parent that she had no idea what had happened to the young man they loved, seemingly dismissing the gravity of her own role, or perhaps trying to minimize her involvement. She seemingly threw her words right into the face of the victim's family, adding insult to injury. Despite their pleas for justice and clarity, Jacine and Christy both ultimately pleaded guilty to their roles in the crime. Their guilty pleas led to sentencing. Each of them received a prison term of 25 years, with an additional 10 years of probation to follow their release from incarceration. These penalties reflected the court's view of the seriousness of their actions and their participation in the crime. The loss inflicted by these teenagers was profound. The court heard a powerful statement from the family of the victim, describing how the defendant had chosen to deprive not just an individual life but also the hopes and dreams of a family and community, leaving emptiness that could never be filled. More than a year and a half later, on February the 18th in the year 2025, Andre Clemens, now 20 years old, also admitted guilt. In a court proceeding, he acknowledged his involvement in the murder, evidence tampering, and conspiracy charges. The judge responded with a sentence of 40 years in prison, accompanied by lifetime probation, emphasizing the gravity and permanence of his actions. This case lingers in the minds of everyone involved, not only because of the horrific nature of the act itself but also because of the series of decisions that led to it. The teenagers' choices, their moments of hesitation, or lack thereof, could have led them down a vastly different path. Instead, they made a series of moves that culminated in tragedy. It's not simply a story about murder, but a cautionary tale about how unchecked anger, twisted loyalties, and impulsive decisions can spiral into irreversible consequences. The victim, DJ Grant, lost his future that day, and in a heartbreaking sense, so did all those connected to him. The three young offenders handed over everything they once held dear: dreams, potential, innocence, for a vendetta rooted in spite and hostility. Now, all that remains are decades of reflection, faced with the stark reality of their actions. There's no easy resolution or neatly tied-up ending to this story. Sometimes the weight of such a tragedy simply persists, weighing heavily on everyone touched by it. If this case resonates with you on any level, remember that these stories are not just about the crime, but about the complex web of choices that led to it. This is a reminder to us all to consider the long-term impacts of our decisions and the importance of seeking better paths when faced with conflict. This is not just a narrative of violence but also a meditation on the destructive power of unchecked emotions and misplaced loyalties. The tragic loss of DJ Grant's life serves as a stark illustration of what can happen when anger overrides reason and when moments of hesitation are sacrificed to impulsivity. The teenagers' lives have been irrevocably altered. Each now faces the difficult task of living with their actions and the profound consequences that followed. There are no quick fixes or simple explanations, only the heavy reality that sometimes the choices we make in a split second can destroy everything we once valued.